Imagine walking into a bank at 20 years old and asking for $150,000 so you can one day fly aeroplanes for a living. The loan officer would ask about your expected starting salary, and you'd have to explain that your first real paycheck won't arrive for 5 years and won't cover rent in most American cities. They'd point you toward the door, but the debt is real, the path is real, and the cost of becoming an airline pilot is one of the best-kept brutal secrets in any profession. Before you ever sit in the cockpit of a jet carrying passengers, you will owe more money than most Americans spend on their first home, and the payoff won't arrive for over a decade. 4 out of 5 people who begin this journey will quit before they finish, not because they're afraid of flying, but because the financial weight crushes them long before the career even starts. This is what it actually costs, level by level, dollar by dollar, to go from someone who dreams about flying into someone who does it for a living. It begins the way most expensive decisions begin, with pure excitement and zero understanding of the financial cliff you're about to walk off with a smile on your face. You're 18 or 20, and you've decided that sitting in an office for the next 40 years sounds like a slow, elaborate form of punishment you refuse to accept on any terms. You want to fly. You've wanted it since you were 7 years old, watching planes climb out of the airport near your house, wondering what the world looked like from up there. So you walk into a flight school at a small municipal airport, and the smell hits you first. A mix of aviation fuel, old carpet, and ambition that hasn't been updated since 1986. The walls are lined with faded photos of graduates who went on to fly for airlines, and a whiteboard lists fuel prices the way a diner lists daily specials, except nothing here is cheap. A friendly coordinator sits you down and explains the program, and for the first time you hear numbers that will define the next decade of your financial life in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Private pilot license, $12,000 to $15,000 minimum, probably closer to 18, because the FAA minimum of 40 hours is a fantasy that almost nobody achieves on their first attempt. Instrument rating, 12 to 15,000 more, to teach you to fly without seeing the ground, because clouds don't care about your comfort, and neither does the airline that would eventually hire you. Commercial pilot license, 20 to 30,000 on top of that, covering the additional training and flight hours the government requires before it certifies that someone can legally pay you to sit in a cockpit. Multi-engine rating, 5 to 8,000, because airline jets have more than one engine, and learning what happens when one decides to quit mid-flight is the difference between employable and unemployable. Certified flight instructor rating, another 8 to 12,000, because the only affordable way to build the remaining hours is to teach other people to fly while earning barely enough to stay alive. Add ground school fees, written exam costs, check ride fees, medical certificates, a headset that costs $1,000, study materials, and fuel surcharges that change weekly. The total comes into focus. Somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 spent over 2 to 3 years before you qualify for your first professional flying job that pays less than a shift manager at a fast food restaurant. And that assumes you train at a local flight school and live cheap, not at a university aviation program where tuition alone runs $40,000 to $60,000 per year before flight fees. Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, the most famous aviation school in the country, costs over $60,000 annually. A 4-year degree there can exceed $240,000 before interest even starts compounding. Even mid-range state university programs with aviation tracks charge $25,000 to $40,000 per year, with flight training stacked on top as a separate line item that the financial aid office doesn't fully cover. You finance it through a combination that would make a financial advisor physically ill. Federal student loans, private aviation loans at 8 to 12% interest, family borrowing, and credit cards with predatory rates. A $100,000 loan at 9% interest will cost you roughly $170,000 by the time you finish paying it off, assuming you make consistent payments, which you won't be able to do for years. You haven't earned a single dollar in a cockpit, and your net worth is a six-figure negative number that grows larger every month you're unable to start making meaningful payments against the principal. But the debt is abstract right now, just digits on a phone screen, and the flying is visceral, immediate, and addictive in a way that overrides every rational financial calculation your brain attempts. Your first flight lesson costs $250 for 90 minutes in a Cessna 172, built before your parents met, repainted so many times the original color is a matter of genuine debate. The instrument panel looks like it belongs in a museum exhibit about the history of analog gauges, and the seat fabric has a pattern that can only be described as aggressively 1974. Your instructor is 24 years old, $300 from maxing out their credit card, building flight hours by teaching you, and dreaming about the exact same airline career you're dreaming about right now. They tell you to put your hands on the yoke, and you notice your fingers are shaking, not from cold, but from the realization that you're about to control a machine that is actively airborne. Plane bucks in thermals rising off a sun-baked parking lot below, and every bump feels like a sign from the universe that aluminium was never meant to float through the atmosphere with humans inside. Over the next 5 months and 60 to 70 hours, you learn the mechanics of flight, maintaining altitude, controlling speed, navigating by instruments, talking to air traffic control, and interpreting weather in real time. You also learn the most critical skill of all, how to bring the airplane back to the ground without turning it into wreckage, which turns out to be considerably harder than getting it into the air. Each hour costs $170 for the airplane rental, plus $50 for the instructor, and you track every dollar on a spreadsheet that resembles the financial statement of a company approaching insolvency. You start measuring all life decisions in flight hours. Those concert tickets cost half a flight hour. That weekend trip your friends are taking costs 2 hours you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Your college roommate just got promoted and bought new furniture, and you're eating peanut butter from the jar at 10 p.m. in a flight school lobby, waiting for weather to clear so your lesson isn't cancelled. Cancelled lessons don't cost money directly, but they cost time. And time is the most expensive resource in aviation training because every extra week means another week of rent, food, and interest quietly compounding. You pass your private pilot check ride after 5 months and roughly $16,000, and the examiner shakes your hand and gives you a piece of paper that changes everything and nothing simultaneously. You can fly an airplane, legally, alone, with passengers, but you cannot be paid a single cent for doing it, which makes this the most expensive hobby license in the entire history of licensing. The next 12 months and $40,000 turn you from a hobbyist into a commercially rated pilot with an instrument rating, a multi-engine rating, and a flight instructor certificate stacked on top. The instrument rating teaches you to fly entirely by gauges, trusting a glass panel over your own senses, because your inner ear will lie to you in the clouds, and your instruments will not. People have died choosing to believe their body over their instruments. The phenomenon is called spatial disorientation, and it has killed experienced pilots who forgot that human balance was not designed for three-dimensional navigation. The commercial license requires mastering maneuvers with names that sound elegant but feel terrifying. Chandelles, lazy eights, steep spirals, and power-off accuracy landings aimed at a specific point on the runway. The multi-engine rating teaches you what happens when one engine fails on a twin, the aircraft yaws violently toward a dead engine, and if your speed drops below a critical number, you lose control entirely. The flight instructor certificate is widely considered the hardest check ride in general aviation, a 2-hour oral exam followed by a flight where you teach each maneuver while explaining the aerodynamics behind it. You pass all 4 ratings across 12 grueling months, and your total debt now sits between $120,000 and $150,000, plus interest that has been compounding since your very first loan payment. You are now a certified flight instructor, legally qualified to teach people to fly, and your annual income in this role will be somewhere around $28,000 to $35,000 before taxes. That's roughly $2,300 a month, from which you'll pay rent, food, car insurance, phone, and loan interest. Notice that actual loan principal repayment is not on that list, because nothing is left. You take a job at the flight school where you trained, earning $18 to $25 per flight hour, not per hour on the clock, per hour with the wheels off the ground. If weather cancels half your schedule, your paycheck gets cut in half. Your income depends on the mood of the atmosphere, which is not what any financial advisor would call a stable revenue model. Your students are a cross-section of humanity: nervous engineers, overconfident teenagers, retired dentists fulfilling lifelong dreams, and a few people who seem genuinely unclear about why they're here in the first place. You teach them what your instructor taught you: takeoffs, landings, stalls, emergency procedures, and you watch them make the exact same mistakes you made, which is comforting and terrifying in equal measure. You demonstrate stall recoveries by deliberately forcing the nose up until the wing stops producing lift and the airplane shudders like a wet dog, then smoothly recovering while your student grips the seat frame with white knuckles. You simulate engine failures at 3,000 feet and guide your student toward an emergency landing field, except you can't actually let them put it down in a soybean field, so you take over at 500 feet. One afternoon, the simulation becomes real. You're on a training flight and the engine starts running rough. The RPM gauge fluctuates wildly and a burning smell enters the cabin through the ventilation system. You seize the controls, declare an emergency, and put the airplane on the ground in under 3 minutes. The mechanic later finds a cracked exhaust valve 2 flights away from catastrophic failure. Your student asks if that kind of thing happens often, and you say no, because telling them the truth, that you've heard similar stories from every instructor at the school, would not help anyone right now. That night you stare at your ceiling and consider that you're being paid $20 an hour to manage life or death situations in machines older than your parents' marriage, while owing more money than a junior surgeon. But you keep flying, because every hour in the logbook is 1 hour closer to 1,500 total, the magic number airlines require before they'll even open your resume from the pile. At the rate you build time, 600 to 800 hours per year, if weather and student schedules cooperate, it takes about 18 months to 2 years to reach that threshold. During those 2 years, your loans accumulate roughly $15,000 to $20,000 in additional interest, meaning the hole you're standing in gets measurably deeper before it starts getting any shallower. You cross 1,500 hours, update your resume, buy a suit at a thrift store because new suits are absolutely not in the budget, and apply to every regional airline in the country. Regional airlines, SkyWest, Republic, Endeavour, PSA, Envoy, Mesa, are companies most passengers have never heard of, but that operate roughly half the flights sold under Delta, United, and American branding. The interview process takes 2 to 3 months. Online aptitude test, video interview, in-person technical evaluation, simulator assessment, and a panel that asks scenario-based questions about leadership and crew coordination. You fly to the interview on a ticket you can't afford, stay in a hotel you can't afford, eat airport food you can't afford, and hope this particular round of unaffordable spending is the last one. Your phone rings on a Tuesday afternoon. You're hired as a first officer at a regional airline, and the celebration lasts roughly 45 minutes before you look at the actual compensation numbers on paper. First-year regional pay in 2024 ranges from $55,000 to $75,000 depending on the carrier. Better than the historic lows of $22,000 a few years ago, but still not remotely enough. Not enough to live comfortably, not enough to make meaningful loan payments, and certainly not enough to do both simultaneously, which is what you desperately need but mathematically cannot accomplish on this salary. Your debt-to-income ratio sits at roughly 2.5 to 1, which means any bank evaluating you for a mortgage would react with the same polite disbelief they showed when you first asked for a flight training loan. Training lasts 6 to 8 weeks. Ground school, systems courses, and simulator sessions in an Embraer E175 or Bombardier CRJ900 that feels like stepping from a bicycle into a race car, engineered by a committee of perfectionists. The cockpit has glass displays, flight management computers, auto-throttle systems, and a level of complexity that makes your Cessna training feel like it happened in a different technological era, which it essentially did. Your first simulator session involves an engine fire on takeoff, a hydraulic failure during approach, and wind shear on final, stacked one after another like someone designing the worst possible sequence of events on purpose. You fail your first practice evaluation, study 14 hours a day for 2 straight weeks, chair fly in your hotel room until your hands ache from pressing invisible buttons, and pass the type rating on your second attempt. You complete 25 hours of operating experience with a check airman grading your every decision, and you stumble through radio calls, botch a checklist, and once say good evening to a tower at 7 in the morning. You learn, you improve, and you're released as a line pilot, a real airline pilot flying real passengers in a real jet, with real debt still growing in the background like a slow and patient leak. You fly 14 to 18 legs on a 4-day trip. Des Moines to Chicago, turn the plane, Chicago to Milwaukee, turn it again, Milwaukee to Detroit, turn it, Detroit back to Chicago, hotel, then repeat everything. Each landing demands full concentration and full checklists, regardless of how many you've already done that day, because the physics of flight do not offer a fatigue discount, and neither does the Federal Aviation Administration. You only get paid from the moment the aircraft door closes to the moment it opens. Ground delays, boarding time, maintenance holds, and tarmac waits are all unpaid hours that happen on almost every single trip. You sleep in crash pads, shared apartments where 6 to 8 pilots rotate through bunk beds, and the name crash pad never stops sounding ironic when your entire profession is built around not crashing. At 4 in the morning in a terminal in Dayton, Ohio, you drink coffee from a vending machine and calculate that your effective hourly wage, including all unpaid ground time, is barely above what you earned as an instructor. But the hours keep building. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and after 3 to 5 years at the regional level, the major airlines begin to notice that your application actually exists. The application for Delta, United, American, or Southwest is the most competitive hiring filter in commercial aviation. Acceptance rates hover around 3 to 5% during competitive years, lower than most Ivy League schools. You need an ATP certificate, 3,000 total flight hours, a 4-year degree, a spotless safety record, and strong references from pilots who have flown with you and can vouch for your judgment. Then you face a panel of 6 senior captains who spend 90 minutes evaluating your technical knowledge, your decision-making under pressure, and whether they'd trust you in the left seat of their aircraft. You spend $2,000 to $5,000 on interview prep, coaching sessions, study materials, travel, a suit that fits properly this time, because this is the single most important job interview of your entire life. A major airline calls with a conditional offer, and you resign from the regional carrier so fast that the ink on your resignation letter is still cooling as you walk out to your car. First-year pay at a major airline ranges from $90,000 to $110,000, and by year 5 you're earning $160,000 to $200,000, depending on aircraft type and base. For the first time since you started this journey, your monthly income exceeds your obligations by enough margin to actually attack the principal on your loans instead of endlessly treading water against compounding interest. At $1,500 a month in aggressive repayment, a $150,000 loan at 8% takes roughly 12 to 15 years to fully eliminate from the date you begin making real payments.
That clock doesn't start until you're earning enough to actually make those payments, meaning interest has been accumulating for nearly a decade before you begin making meaningful progress against the original borrowed amount. You started training at 20, you began earning enough to repay at 28 or 29, and you'll be debt-free somewhere around 40 to 43, 2 full decades after the first dollar was borrowed. But the flying has transformed into something you couldn't have imagined when you were circling a traffic pattern in a Cessna with rust on the gear and tape on the wing struts. You're flying a Boeing 787 Dreamliner across the Pacific, a $300 million aircraft carrying 270 passengers who are sleeping, watching films, and entirely unaware of the complexity unfolding above them. The flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo takes 11 hours, crosses 5 time zones, burns 40,000 pounds of fuel, and requires coordination with air traffic control agencies in 3 different sovereign nations. You manage oceanic crossings where the nearest runway is 1,000 miles away, and communication with the ground happens via satellite data link, typed messages sent through space instead of voice calls through radio. Your body clock has permanently stopped making sense. You left at midnight, you'll arrive at 5 a.m. local time, your phone says it's yesterday, and the sun is rising in a direction your brain refuses to accept. Jet lag isn't an inconvenience at this level, it's a chronic occupational condition. NASA fatigue research shows long-haul pilots lose roughly 1 hour of effective sleep for every time zone crossed on eastbound flights. You take melatonin to sleep, caffeine to wake, and maintain a schedule that rotates every month based on your seniority bid, which is the single most powerful force in an airline pilot's professional existence. Seniority is a number assigned the day you're hired, and it controls your pay, your schedule, your base city, your aircraft, your vacation, and your upgrade timeline to captain. Literally everything that matters. If you were hired March 15th and someone else was hired March 14th, they are ahead of you forever. No performance review, no merit promotion, no conversation with management will ever change that order. You wait 8 years, maybe 12, maybe 15, watching pilots hired 6 months before you upgrade to captain and start earning $100,000 more per year while you remain in the right seat. But the day arrives. An email appears offering captain upgrade training, and you accept before your brain finishes processing the first sentence, because you've been waiting for this message since you were 20 years old. Captain training is the most demanding evaluation of your career. 6 to 8 weeks of systems study, simulator sessions with cascading failures, and leadership scenarios designed to test judgment under pressure
that would break most people. You learn to command from the left seat, to make final decisions with complete authority, to manage a first officer who might be brand new or might have more hours than you and opinions about everything. Every imaginable disaster is thrown at you in the simulator. Engine failure at V1, rapid depressurization at 40,000 feet, dual hydraulic loss, cargo fire, severe icing, wind shear on a short final in rain. You pass the check ride, receive 4 stripes, and the first time you sit in the left seat of a wide-body jet as the legal authority over the flight, the weight settles onto your shoulders like something physical. Senior wide-body captains at major carriers earn $350,000 to $450,000 per year. Senior 777 and A350 captains with top seniority can clear $500,000 annually. The debt that once defined your existence is finally gone, or nearly gone, and your bank account does something it has never done in 20 years of professional flying. It grows consistently, month after month. But every captain tells you the same thing when you ask about the money. The salary is not why they sit in that seat, and it is not what makes the 2-decade journey worth the cost.
An engine fails over the North Atlantic 1,500 miles from the nearest runway, and 300 passengers behind a locked door have no idea the aircraft just lost half its thrust. You declare an emergency, run the single-engine checklist methodically, not fast, methodically, because speed creates errors, and errors at this altitude over open water create outcomes that no checklist can reverse. You coordinate with dispatch, calculate fuel reserves, weigh diversion options, and land safely in Keflavik, Iceland. Passengers complain about the delay, and nobody will ever know how narrow the margin actually was. A passenger collapses at 38,000 feet over the Central Pacific. A doctor on board confirms cardiac arrest, and the nearest hospital is 700 miles of open ocean in every direction. You declare a medical emergency, begin a rapid descent, burn fuel reserved for the destination, and diverge to Honolulu. The patient survives because you made the right call in under 90 seconds of deliberation. The passenger whose connection was cancelled leaves a 1-star review online, and your reward for saving a human life is an angry comment about a missed flight to Osaka and a rating below a pizza restaurant. You mentor first officers the way your first captain mentored you, with patience, with calm, with the understanding that every nervous pilot in the right seat is carrying the same dream you carried at 20. You teach them to read weather, manage fuel, communicate with clarity, and stay composed when every instinct is screaming, because the person next to you takes their emotional cues from your face. Senior captains fly 12 to 15 days a month, earn more per year than they earned in their entire first decade of flying combined, and the rice and beans years are finally, mercifully, permanently behind them. You're 57 now, 3 years from mandatory retirement at 60, and on a day off, you drive to a small airport on the edge of town and rent a Cessna 172 for 1 hour. It's nearly the same model you flew at 20, same faded paint, same scratchy radio, same instrument panel designed by someone who believed digital technology was a passing fad that would never last. You take off alone, climb to 3,000 feet, and fly with no flight plan, no passengers, no checklist longer than a napkin, just you and the engine, and the open sky stretching to the horizon. The sun is setting ahead of you, painting clouds in shades of gold and amber that no camera has ever captured properly because technology still lacks the ability to record what this actually feels like. For a moment, you're 22 again, hands trembling on the yoke, an instructor beside you saying your controls, $150,000 of debt waiting in your future like a storm you couldn't yet see.
Except now the debt is paid, the storms are behind you, and your hands are steady. And you're smiling because, after everything it cost, this is still the only place you've ever truly wanted to be. So the next time you board a flight and the captain's voice comes through the speakers, calm and measured and perfectly professional, know that voice was purchased with 2 decades of sacrifice and 6 figures of debt. And if you ask that captain whether they'd do it all again, every dollar, every ramen dinner, every crash pad, every 4 a.m. alarm in a city they'll never revisit, they'd say yes before you finished asking. If this changed the way you think about the person flying your plane, subscribe, because every video on this channel will change the way you see something you thought you already understood.